Who was Marco Polo? Chapter 2. Marco leaves home. By the time the Polos returned to Italy in 1269, the Pope had died. They waited and waited for another Pope to be chosen. 2 years later, in the spring of 1271, they decided to quit waiting and head back to China. Marco was 17 now. He wanted to go to China too. He didn't want to be left behind. His father and uncle knew the trip would be dangerous, still they agreed to take him along. They sailed from Venice into the Adriatic Sea and then south to the Mediterranean Sea. In those days, sailors believed there were giant monsters in the sea. Maybe Niccolo thought his son would get scared and want to turn back, but Marco never did. Their first stop was the city of Acre, then on to Jerusalem. To Christians, Jews, and Muslims, Jerusalem is a holy city. Important events in each religion took place there. Jesus lived and died in Jerusalem. King Solomon built the first Jewish temple there, and the Islamic prophet Muhammad rose to heaven in Jerusalem. Ownership of Jerusalem has changed many times over the centuries. In 1099, armies of Christian knights conquered the city during military campaigns called the Crusades. Then in 1187, Muslims gained control of the city. Jerusalem was still under Muslim rule when the Polos stopped there and took a sample of the special oil from the church. Afterward, they set out for China. They hadn't gone far when they heard that a new pope had finally been chosen. Luckily, he was nearby, in Acre. The Polos went and told him of the Khan's request for 100 priests. The new pope listened. He decided to send some expensive presents, such as crystal, but he would send only 2 friars instead of priests. In a letter to the Khan, the Pope explained that the 2 friars would train Kubla's men to become priests. Then the new Mongol and Chinese priests could teach others about Christianity. Would this change make Kubla Khan mad? The Polos hoped not. They needed the Khan's friendship in order to make sure no one in his empire harmed them. That way they could buy Chinese goods and safely bring them all the way back to Europe. In China, they not only planned to get silks, but they wanted to bring back porcelain too. Porcelain is a kind of pottery that is made from special white clay and painted with beautiful designs. To China by land and sea. In Marco Polo's day, there were 2 main ways to get to East Asia from Europe: the Silk Road and the Spice Route. Neither way was easy. The Silk Road was about 5,000 miles long, mostly over land. The Spice Route was mostly by sea. Each was named for the things Europeans wanted most from Asia: silk and spices. A trader usually only traveled part way on these routes. When he reached a city, he sold his goods, wood for example, to another merchant there. That merchant took the wood farther along the route to another city, where it was sold again. The goods changed hands many times before reaching China, where the wood was traded for silks and spices. At this point, the return trip began. Both coming and going, each trader charged a little more for the resold goods. After all, they wanted to make a profit. By the time the goods got to the end of the journey, they cost much more than when they started out. In other parts of Kubla's empire, the Polos hoped to find diamonds, rubies, and pearls. In Turkey, they would buy lovely carpets. They wanted spices such as nutmeg, cinnamon, and pepper from India, and the Spice Islands, now called Indonesia. Back home, they could sell everything and get rich. In November of 1271, the Polos and the 2 friars set off for China again. First, they sailed north in the Mediterranean Sea. When they tried to land in Armenia, they ran into trouble. Egyptians were attacking it. The 2 friars got scared. The trip had barely begun, and already there was danger, so they turned back. The Polos continued on, but now all they had was holy oil to take to the Khan. some of the silk material that they would use. And of course, spices, which we're used to. We have lots of spices that we use in our cooking. Jewels and crystals, all things that they couldn't readily find in Europe. They were looking to get and trade. The Silk Secret. The Chinese made beautiful clothes out of silk fabric. Designs were sewn on the silk with brightly colored thread. They were works of art. For thousands of years, silk producers in China kept their ways of making silk a secret. Eventually, their secret got out. Here's how silk is made. 1. Silkworm moths lay eggs. 2. After 10 days, the eggs hatch into small caterpillars called silkworms. 3. The silkworms eat mulberry leaves. 4. When a silkworm is about 1 month old, it shoots a stream of liquid from its mouth. This hardens into a strand of silk. The worm wraps the strand around itself, creating a cocoon. The cocoon is made of a single thread that can be half a mile long. 5. Silk workers drop the cocoons into boiling water to kill the pupa. Otherwise, the moth pupa might bite its way out of the cocoon and break the silk strand. Boiling also makes the silk soft and easy to unwind. This shows you the egg, the silkworm hatches, grows and grows and grows. There it makes the cocoon. They take the cocoon and they put it in the water. Then they take several cocoons and they unwind the thread, but they weave it together into a stronger strand, and then they they weave it into fabric. 6, the cocoons are unwound by hand. Okay, that's what we just saw. 7, 3 or more strands of silk are twisted together to make one strong thread. And 8, the threads are woven into silk cloth and then dyed bright colors. Chapter 3, the long trip to China. On the way to China, Marco saw sights that seemed very strange to him. He wrote about them in journals. Because he was a merchant, he paid special attention to the products of each area. He also noted any dangers and whether food and water were easy to find. Maybe he thought this information would help other merchants who traveled to Asia after him. One of the first and most famous sights he saw was Mount Ararat in what is now Turkey. According to the Bible, this was where Noah's Ark landed after a great flood. Deep snow covered the mountaintop all year round, so Marco saw no point in going up there to try to find the Ark. Near the Caspian Sea, Marco saw natural oil wells for the first time. It was the kind of oil used to make gasoline today. In Europe at the time, people burned fires, candles, or oils made from animals or vegetables for light. Marco was amazed that the oil he saw in Asia came from the ground. He called it a fountain from which oil springs. In Persia, called Iran now, Marco saw 3 famous tombs. They were said to be the tombs of the 3 wise men who came to see the baby Jesus. Marco wrote that the 3 wise men were buried in 3 large and beautiful monuments side by side. The oil you can see in the ground. Plans constantly changed during the long trip. The Polos were attacked by bandits in Persia, but they managed to escape. To avoid more run-ins with bandits, they decided to head south for the Indian Ocean. Maybe sea travel would be safer. They searched for ships in the city of Hormuz along the Persian Gulf. This was a great trading center where merchants from India came to sell spices, pearls, silk, and ivory. Marco said that sometimes a wind blew there that was so hot that it would kill everybody. When the people of Hormuz heard this wind coming, they jumped into the nearest stream until it passed. Unfortunately, the ships in Hormuz were poorly built. They were held together with rope made from coconut husks instead of nails. The Polos decided that traveling over land might be safer after all. The Polos turned around and headed north toward the land that is now Afghanistan. There they saw a fabulous ruby mine. They saw wild sheep with curly horns 5 feet long. These sheep were later named Ovis Poli, which means Polo's sheep. Marco had been sick for a while at this point. He heard a legend that said breathing fresh air in the mountains of Afghanistan would cure any illness. After resting up in those mountains, he did get well, and they moved on. There were many other interesting sights in Afghanistan. In the city of Balkh, Marco wrote to watch out for lions. In Shabargan, he found the very best melons in the world. The mountains of Talakan were made of salt, which was so hard it could only be broken with iron picks. Marco thought there was enough salt there to supply the whole world till the end of time. Salt was worth a lot back then, so he was impressed. The Polos had gone 5,000 miles by the time they arrived in the city of Lop. But before they reached Kublai Khan's palace, they would have to cross the dangerous Gobi Desert. This desert covers 500,000 square miles in northern China and southern Mongolia. It has sand mountains called dunes that rise as high as 1,250 feet. That's as tall as the Empire State Building in New York, minus its antenna. In Lop, the Polos bought food and lots of water. They hired camels, which were called ships of the desert. If necessary, a camel can go without water for up to 2 weeks and without food for even longer. Its wide feet stop it from sinking into the sand. Its strong jaws allow it to eat thorny desert plants. Long eyelashes keep sand from blowing in its eyes. It can even close its nostrils to keep sand out of its nose. The Polos rode through the desert at night because the days were too hot. The Gobi sandstorms can kill travelers. About once a day, they stopped at an oasis to rest and buy more supplies. An oasis is a spot in the desert with a spring of underground water. Small villages had formed around the Gobi's oases. Marco heard strange sounds in the desert that sounded like people marching, talking, and playing drums. According to legend, it was an army of ghosts. Sometimes people chased after the ghosts, got lost, and died. The sounds were really caused by strong winds and shifting sands. It took the Polos a month to cross 600 miles of the Gobi Desert. In his palace in the city of Chengdu, Kublai Khan got word that the Polos were returning. Chengdu is in the Hebei province of modern-day China. He sent guides to bring them to his palace. And so on the Polos went, through what are now the provinces of Gansu, Shaanxi, Shaanxi, and Ningxia. After so long a journey, Marco may have wondered if he'd ever meet the powerful Mongol leader he had heard so much about.